So Ben, what footballer works best without internet access?
I don't know.
Offline or Messi?
God, man.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Jack and Ben show. My name's Jack, I'm a developer evangelist here at Pusher, and I'm joined by my colleague Ben.
I'm also a developer evangelist here at Pusher as well.
Go us.
Go us, go team.
Cool, and yeah, today we're going to be talking a bit about the web and building offline websites and applications.
Cool. So I'm really excited about offline web apps, especially with stuff we do at Pusher. I think it works with the things that we see people using Pusher for, because when you're building something that reacts to real-time data, you've almost got intuitively an offline state as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing people adapt that more as a kind of UI thing.
Yeah.
And also another thing that's kind of exciting at the moment is we just released a new version of our Pusher.js library, which also runs in a service worker. And I think there's a lot of kind of cool stuff that we could do there.
Yeah, shout out to our colleague Jamie for Pusher 3.1.
Yeah, totally.
Go Jamie. So service workers are kind of one of the main focuses of the offline web today. They've been around, they're fairly new, but it's fair to say they've been around for a little bit of time now.
And they're kind of rolling out a little bit as well.
Across other browsers rather than Chrome, where they were kind of pushed forward initially. So a service worker is kind of a script that sits between the browser and the network, right? And it lets you intercept requests and either respond with some static data for those requests, or go into a cache of data, which is obviously works offline. Or you can go and still hit the network and then cache the response, and then the next time you have that data back. So that's the kind of general idea, right? With service workers is we can have loads of control over the network request, which we've never been able to do before.
Totally, and that whole style of having a kind of script that is existing outside your page just allows so many kind of new things, which is awesome. And I really like how it's such a kind of small idea, but it's got really big ramifications. So suddenly you're able to kind of have push notifications, do background syncing, all that kind of stuff. So last week I was at Csvconf over in Berlin, which was brilliant. So it was about kind of open data and things that we can do with that. And I built a project for that, which was a tool that gathered together data from a Runkeeper API, the Runkeeper API, and pulls down all that data and allows you to access that through a service worker. So you're kind of synthesizing these URLs. And what's really cool is once you've got the data in your browser, you can format that data in different ways through that service worker. And it means that you don't have to have a kind of complex web service that is doing all this kind of processing. And yeah, it worked out pretty well, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I really liked when I saw the demo application you'd built was how you had a ton of different URLs that gave you the data in a different set of data, or categorize it differently, or whatever. What I really liked about that is because you're caching all the data offline, is if you visited a.json and get a particular set of JSON, you're online for that. That was fine, but now the data is cached offline. You can go to b.json and it will show you a different set of data, but from the cache.
Absolutely.
So you had kind of full offline support with pretty little effort.
Totally.
Really.
I think the service worker is a really nice abstraction for if you're doing, especially data-driven visualizations and stuff. So in your front end, you're just making an AJAX call, and that happens to not be going to the server, but just being served just from the service worker. And that means that your front-end code doesn't have to know anything about the database. It doesn't have to know about anything to do with how to access those APIs. All it sees is a kind of JSON or a CSV or whatever file you want. And I like it.
Prior to service worker, we had this thing called Appcache, which was the precursor really, which was didn't really let you configure much about it. It kind of gave you this solution, and if that solution fitted what you were doing, that was great, but if it didn't, then that really kind of you couldn't tweak it or change it. I think the Jake Archibald's post Appcache is a douchebag and kind of spoke about it, and that led towards Jake and others working on service workers. And it's really interesting, we're seeing this trend now of new browser APIs and features being added that are much more lower level than we would have expected in the past. And service worker is a really good example of this because it gives you nothing out the box, right? You have to write, even the most basic example of a service worker where you hit the network, you cache the request, then you serve from the cache, you still have to write the code to do that. There's not that much to write, but you still have to do it. But
totally.
I've really enjoyed that we're exposing more lower level APIs and giving developers full control. Even if that means there's a bit more work up front and it's a bit more complicated to get started with, longer term, I think the benefits are huge for doing that. So one of the things that I really like about Service Worker is it's a very low level API. I think we're seeing this more and more with new browser features, is rather than expose some high level feature that you can kind of either use or not use and not really tweak, we can now get this low-level API that is maybe a bit more work to set up and get started with, but longer term gives you complete control, which is really, really nice. And even the most basic use case of sending requests to the network, getting a response back, caching it, and then serving it from the service worker requires any developer to write 10 lines of code, whatever it is, maybe a bit fewer. But if later on you have some really contrived use case you need to use it for, you can, because you have access to the real low-level nitty-gritty nuts and bolts, if you like, which is really good to see, I think.
And I think we'll see quite a lot of libraries that are utilizing service workers and kind of building on that, and you almost probably won't even be touching it necessarily.
You then get offline support for free, effectively, because in the background, PouchDB is going into local storage and it syncs everything for you. So I've just been building a really quite boring note-taking application because that's a novel idea. But it's really cool because if I'm writing a note on my cool app that I'm going to sell for millions, and then suddenly I go into it, I'm on a tunnel on a train, I can still keep writing my notes, and when my internet comes back, it will all sync for me. And that's possible because we have these low-level APIs, and then Pouch adds to that, right? Totally. And it's really cool. I think although service workers are fairly new, I think Google have already got service worker pre-cache and a couple of others which will generate service workers for you. If you tell them kind of, I want to cache this file and this file and this file, they'll just give you a service worker that does that. I think long term, you're right. I wonder how much we'll even write service workers if tools for the most basic use cases will generate them for us, and that'll be it. And that'll be great.
We're viewing it as a way of kind of caching files and keeping those kind of static files ready in case you're offline. But also what I think I find really exciting about it is the prospect of having more real-time data sets using service workers to kind of serve that when you're offline, which is something, with the new version of Pusher, I've been playing around with that quite a bit, and I'm really liking kind of patching the cache to kind of add new data as it's been pushed out by Pusher. I think there's some really kind of exciting stuff there, and there's also so service workers allow this kind of push to exist because you don't have to have a web page open to receive a message. And also there's a background sync API, which I think is just in Chrome, but which is super cool. Yeah, and that is effectively try and make a request to the network, and if you're not on a network, it will just sit there and wait until you are on a network and then send it off, right? Yeah. So I think Jake Archibald at RenderConf did the demo of a chat app. Was it his emoji chat app? Yeah. And he sent this message and he didn't have a connection, so he hit enter, and to him on his mobile it all looked fine, the message had been sent in inverted commas, if you like, and then when he came back online it was sent, and then he got all the replies and stuff. So it's amazing, and it's a really exciting time to kind of start playing with this stuff, I think it's it just opens up all these possibilities for web apps to feel much more natural as you're using them and kind of on your phone going through network bad spots or whatever. I think it's I think the web's going to be a better place as a result.
Absolutely. I think we've seen, I think the worst thing for a mobile user is you load up this website and it's a widescreen because I think people call it li-fi. Either you haven't got Wi-Fi, and then at least if you haven't got Wi-Fi you get a 404, or you get the Chrome Dinosaur or whatever. But if you've got this fake Wi-Fi or really bad signal, you just get a white page as it's loading stuff, which is just such a rubbish experience. And that's one area where native apps traditionally have had a benefit, because if I load up, say the Facebook native app and I'm offline, I'll still get all the content from whenever I last looked at Facebook or Twitter or whatever it might be. But now with service worker and background sync, all these things that are in the pipeline, we can match that, if not do better than that, and that's really cool. Yeah. You've got Pusher running in your service worker, listening out for these events.
Exactly. So I've been hacking around a little bit with using Pusher in a service worker, which has actually been kind of going pretty well. So it's quite different from the push notifications and from background sync. Is kind of for real-time data as you've got a window open, and it's got some really kind of nice benefits. And what's really cool about it is I can start off with this really simple app architecture. You don't need to kind of have this huge infrastructure of lots of different libraries. It's just basically you've got your app and it works as normal, and then you can just add a service worker on the side to kind of enhance it. And I think it's been quite cool. There'll be a blog post about it this week. We'll put it in the show notes.
Cool. Yeah. That's definitely one of the best things about service workers for me is they're a separate script. You can add them to any existing website and still make them useful. And also, it's a perfect example of progressive enhancement, because you just, in your main JavaScript, you just have it if, whatever the check is, if service workers are enabled, add this service worker, else don't bother. So I think that's also driven adoption a lot because there's no downside to using them really. Even if they only affect half your users, that's great.
Yeah.
And that number is only going to go up as more and more vendors start to work and implement it. I'm pretty sure we're mostly there now.
Yeah.
I think Apple might be the ones who are not so sure about where they're at.
Usual.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know, like, so a kind of cool little thing. What really irritates me sometimes is using custom fonts, like from Google Fonts or whatever like that. But you can totally use a service worker to like optimize that. So anything that is outside of your origin, you can intercept with a service worker. So it doesn't just have to be your own files. It can be stuff on like Google Fonts, or it can be kind of any
API or anything.
Yeah, cool. Which is like super powerful.
Yeah.
So these videos are kind of a new idea, and we're trying out other things. This week we're going to try out an any other business section.
So this week Elm 0.17 got released. So Elm is a typed functional language that compiles to JavaScript, which kind of takes a very different approach to building JavaScript applications. It's always been very, very powerful. It's kind of in its infancy, but picked up a fair amount of steam from the community. And this week, the latest version, 0.17, got released, which removes one of the more, or doesn't remove, it kind of hides away / abstracts out one of the more complicated parts of Elm, which were called signals, which are these values that kind of change over time, kind of like streams in reactive JS or whatever, and replaces them with these things called subscriptions. There's kind of the nitty-gritty details don't really matter, but what's important is they've kind of dramatically simplified Elm for people coming to the language and removed one of its more complicated, hard to understand features with a much more straightforward model, which is really exciting. So I think over the coming weeks we'll be talking and updating some of our Elm examples and blog posts to 0.17, but really exciting to see how this release will affect people picking up Elm, because I think it will help a lot.
Cool. That's great. Like, because I actually think about that, like, because I really enjoyed that talk you gave on Elm that I caught.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. It was great. But the signals were like a thing that I was just like, I was into it, but it was kind of a bit heavy or something.
Yeah, they're very tricky. Elm kind of goes like, this is okay, this is okay, this is okay, bam, you get signals. So the latest release of Elm kind of has a lot of improvements other than that as well, which is really nice.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. What about you, Ben? Have you got any other business?
This week I've been thinking quite a lot about circles, just generally. Okay. Right, so I've been working on this kind of this real-time graphing thing, and I think I've been playing around with basically different modes of plotting that, and I think I've come up with something which is kind of quite pretty. So I've been like looking into that quite a lot. Cool. So basically all I wrote was like this kind of a few functions for like if you find out if a circle's intersecting and how to like move them around.
Oh, nice, okay.
And based on those kind of like really tiny primitives, you can do all these kind of really crazy, cool looking things. So circles are cool.
So I guess thank you very much for watching. If there's anything you'd like to hear Ben and I talk about on the next show or in future editions, you can tweet at Pusher and we'll pick it up and get back to you. You can leave any comments on the video. We'll also leave some show notes with links to relevant things we've mentioned throughout. But yeah, thank you very much for watching, and we will see you next time.